Okay, everyone. How's everyone doing? It's good to see people in the room, or at least your names, and your pics for your profile. So, welcome everyone. Welcome to those of you who are new, joining us for the first time. This is Medicine Buddha practice, and this is, for those of you who are new, this is a practice based upon the Tibetan Buddhist practice of Medicine Buddha, and we explore just different facets of practice, um, and the different ways to get into the practice and so forth. So that's what this is. So yeah, continue to introduce yourself. Go ahead. If you're introducing yourself, or if you want to either just kind of post how you're doing, just like a little bit of check-in, so I see how people are doing, and um, prayer requests too, um, as well if you're interested. Now I know there were couple of questions from last week that I didn't get a chance to look at. So if you had a question from last week, if you can go ahead and put that in the question box, and let's see if I can get to that um, tonight. So I'll those will be priority um, tonight. Um, what else? So I will we'll continue with the practice we've been doing for the past couple of weeks, and I want to actually start moving towards spring practice. So this has been winter practice, and we did fall practice before the winter. And so I want to slowly start transitioning into spring. Spring is revival, awakening, resurrection. Um, it's also spring practice for me in terms of ceremonies and rituals are around the mother, the goddess, um, and some of the festivals associated with ancient rites around goddesses, and um, particularly rituals around um, like fertility, which of course is a symbol for the awakening of spring from the sleep of winter. Um, so, so we'll transition into that, um, and I'll continue broadcasting from the UK, from um, from wherever I am in the UK, and so that will be great. And if there's a Monday that I won't be able to, it will be midnight for me, um, from the UK. But if there's a Monday that the only reason I wouldn't do it is being or is not being having access to internet and Wi-Fi. So, but I'm not traveling on Mondays necessarily. So hopefully I'll be able to maintain um, practices. So let's see. So again, any questions from last week that people didn't get answered, please go ahead and put those in the ask a question section. So I want to prioritize that. I didn't even get a chance to look at them last week, so I don't really actually um, remember anything to answer. So I'm just reading some of the messages. I also want to, with spring, I may do this from the UK, but I want to add another mantra to our practice, and it's a healing mantra um, from a female deity. Um, So I just am waiting to get the mantra transmitted to me um, from my Swami. Um, and so as soon as I keep forgetting to get it, but it's a mantra that I use in my practice. I've been actually using it for um, definitely over a year in my kind of personal healing practice, and I've been really combining it with medicine Buddha practice, and it's been really quite quite powerful. I consider the mantra to be very settling, very grounding. I think that'll be really great to add this mantra um, at the end of practice to kind of settle energy. So you'll get more about that um, um, maybe even next week. Maybe I'll introduce it next week if I can get it before then. Okay. But yeah, so going back, yeah, we're gonna slowly start transitioning into some spring practice. I know some of us are still in the heart of winter, depending on where we're at on this land, in the southern United States. This is Muskogee, Cherokee, and Creek land. Um, we call Atlanta. It's been cold, but it's things are blooming already. So like I feel that like push into spring, but I also feel the hold of winter still really strongly. Um, so maybe we'll start pushing out a little bit. Okay. So again, if you're new, you can introduce yourself. You can do a check-in. You can add a prayer request for which I'll offer verbally once we begin practice. Or you can not do any of that. Just hang out. Um, Let me just check the questions. Um, mhm. Let's see. I can just take a few minutes to look at these questions here. From last week, I believe everything is energy and consciousness. Would you speak on your view of everything being emptiness and energy as this relates to conflicts? Let's see if I understand the question. But everything is energy and consciousness. Would you speak in emptiness and energy as this relates to conflicts? Um, let's see. And maybe it's a possibility that I'm misunderstanding the question. So I'm gonna read it one more time just to say I believe everything is energy and consciousness. Would you speak or your view of everything being emptiness as energy as this relates to conflicts? I don't. This is from Sharon. Sharon, if you can clarify the question a little bit more, because I don't want to answer something that you're not actually asking. Um, so I get the first part, I believe everything is energy and consciousness. Would you speak on your view of everything being emptiness and energy as this relates? So this is the last part of the question. I don't think I'm as clear as I should be on. So would you speak on your view of everything being emptiness and energy? So what do you mean by as this relates or conflict? So if my view is so speak on my view of everything being emptiness and energy as this relates to conflicts. As this relates to conflicts to energy and consciousness. So I just want to get that clarified before I like go down the path um, as well. But in the meantime, let's move to the second question. I hear parts. So I hear parts of so many of the practices you offer as supporting one, breaking up with ego. Yeah, in a way, I'll come back to that. Can I ask if you could offer some ways in which to practice with or work towards freedom from the fear of my own death and how that obstructs my engagement with practice? Yeah, well, that should be one and the same. So practicing kind of breaking up with ego. By breaking up, how I understand that breaking up is understanding our relationship to ego, to the sense of self. Like it's not that we're breaking up, as well. It's not that I'm breaking up with the ego. It's more like I'm just trying to get clear about what this relationship is, you know, like what's really happening. Um, like I don't want to break up. I want to change my proximity to ego. It's the better way to do it. You don't want to. You want to breaking, destruction, stuff. Words like that I know are very common in tantric practices, but it's not exactly what we're doing in practice. But again, it's the matter of translation, right? Um, so we're trying to transform our relationship to ego. Like that breaking, you don't want to, it's not about pushing the ego away. It's not about erasing the ego. It's not about abruptly disconnecting from ego. It's about actually a gentle realization that what I thought was real wasn't real. So it's like being at home, being in your house, wherever you live, and you hear a noise. So it's like late at night, for instance, is when we always hear the noises. So it's like super late at night, you hear a noise, you know. And it's like, it's a noticeable loud noise. And of course the first thing we think um, is okay, someone's breaking in. Of course, the first thing I think is that where did this fucking spirit come from? I didn't invite them. It's another talk. But so we don't know what it is. So we react. Like you hear this noise, you're like, oh my God, what's going on? Someone's breaking in, or there's an unwanted presence of some form in the house, you know. And that's how we are to that's our basic relationship to the ego. Something's happening and we're making an assumption and we're reacting to it. And that's creating a narrative about what is and what isn't. Right? What practice is doing is encouraging us to actually go figure out what that noise is, to go look, to like search around, right? And if need be, we take a weapon, you know, like you take something, wherever it is it may be, like wherever it is, if they're in my house, I'm gonna, do something. I'm gonna protect myself, you know, that's, anyway, I'll continue. Um, I'm gonna protect myself gets real confusing in this analogy. Um, so I'm going to go investigate what this is and figure out what this is. So let's just say you go and investigate and you realize it's just something like, I don't know, you have a cat, you have a pet, and they knock something over. You realize that's what it was. And then in that moment, like what is that feeling? In that moment you have when you realize what that noise really was. And you just relax, you open, you expand, you're like, oh, that's what that was. Then all of a sudden you're great, right? The noise still happened, and there's potential for more noise to happen, but you have this thing in your mind that says, oh, my cat just keeps knocking over things, and that's what that is. This is kind of what this is. This is what we're trying to figure out. We're using our practice to figure out what's really happening. What's this thing I keep reacting to? And is it what I think it is? Right? In practice, like in relationship to actual practicing self and ego, once you figure out what it is, then you're freed from the fear or the reactivity or the love, or the attachment to it, because you're like, oh, this is nothing. It's just a sound, it's just a noise. Why was I reacting so much to this? So, of course, when you get there, the ego is the foundation of a belief in death, right? The ego says we're real. If you're real, why would we die? You know, if we're so real, communicates a sense of permanence. If you're permanent, then why do you transition, right? And that's the problem, is that we haven't done enough work to understand transitions, right? Part of the reason I like to practice with seasons like we've been doing since fall is that I want us to understand transitions more, that there is a season for everything. Seasons are about transition, shifting those different energies, different experiences, different ways to practice. And this is how our lives are arranged. We just go through a series of things over and over again, but it's all transition and change and everything. We're afraid of death because we haven't understood the impermanence of every second of our life. Like we're disconnected from that. Therefore, we're disconnected from death itself. And if you're not afraid of dying itself, I think, secondly, what we may be more afraid of is this pain. The pain, the suffering of death, right? And I know that carries a lot of fear for all of us, right? But again, it goes back to the illusion of ego and impermanence, where we, at the transition, right, between, this realm and the next, understanding how everything is temporary, it's like everything is just a moment. It may seem like a very long moment. That moment may be actually years, but it's actually still a moment. At death, I know most of us don't, if any of us, remember our death. But at death, my assumption is that, as we talked about last week, we begin to understand the illusion of time itself. And we may have lived how many ever years, just say 70 or 80 years. At the moment of death, those 70 or 80 years will actually seem maybe like a second or a split second, because even time was an illusion, So do we actually live 80 years or whatever, however long you live? No, what's a year? What's time? It's all just an illusion built around the sense of self, which is grounding everything around us into this false illusion of permanence, that everything is just like the same, it stays the same, it's never changing, right? And then it becomes a great shock to us, when we realize our own impermanence, our mortal impermanence. Not that we're not trying to practice to get to this point of just not feeling anything at death. Like, you want to mourning the grief. Like, grief is healthy. Like, grief is a way that or skillful grieving, as I call it in my work. Skillful grieving is the work of like slowly naming and recognizing and experiencing the brokenheartedness, the pain from having to let go, from having to experience change, right? And that's healthy, But in skillful grief, we have to learn to let things go and move through things, particularly at the transition, that we call death. We're letting go of this illusion, this life. And you also want to let go of people too. But I know love becomes this factor that binds us to people, as it should, but you can love and still have agency and flexibility to transition and not feel as if you're bound necessarily to anyone. Or, well, not into any place, too, which is another issue as well. We become bound to this physical plane in a way that feels trapped, you know. Um, which is, I don't know, I think it's, I don't know, there's so much, there's so many other things to experience, and in the energy body than just wanting to recreate the physical body and life on this plane. I don't know. This is why practice in this way is so important, because we're training in what freedom feels like. We're also training in the capacity of mind to create experiences or realities of liberation. So if you haven't had that training, right, then so therefore at the moment of death, you don't actually know what's possible. You don't know what the potential is. One of our methods in tantric practice, particularly in Buddhist tantra, is to take on the form of the deity, because the way that we practice deities, the wisdom deities, are nothing but an expression of this energy and consciousness, right? It's just also all it is. So if you become the deity, then you're becoming the reality. You're becoming truth. The truth is you're just energy and consciousness, and an intense kind of freedom for us. It's the beings who can't get that because they're still trapped in this belief in permanence. They're still trapped in the realness of thoughts and emotions, and those thoughts and emotions collide together to create a sense of attachment to places and people. Also, not just places and people. You get attached to feelings and thoughts of who you were, or God forbid, what I want to do to get even with whoever, caused my death. Um, this all just goes back to the ego. It goes back all the way back to the ego. Is if I can just have just a glimpse of the illusion of ego, that's enough to build an experience of liberation on, um, as we transition. Um, but it's not, death isn't like that big of a deal. Actually, it's really, it doesn't, death like the ego doesn't exist, but we've made it into a thing, right? Um, you could say it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, but the only thing to do is to relax and to let go. However, you know, how we live really determines how we die and what we experience right after our transition. So, if we haven't done hardly anything to have, I would say, a virtuous life, if we haven't really done the work to help people practice kindness, compassion, and love, if we've been actually instead dominated by anger and rage and resentfulness and so forth, that creates a really painful experience, right? So you can have a physically painful death, right? But the mental, emotional transition doesn't have to be painful, especially if you've done the practice for however long you've had to do your practice. Like if you've done any amount of practice, it will help move us through the uh, emotional, mental suffering of transitioning. what we're trying to do is we want energy to be fluid and flowing. We don't want energy to stop. We don't want energy to solidify. I mean, it doesn't solidify, but like we don't want energy. We don't want to invest in a belief that energy is solid, right? And when we do pranayama practice and working with the channels and the chakras in the body, what we're trying to do is cut through. So the blocks that we have in our bodies are just mental blocks, they're emotional mental blocks. So we're actually trying, working with the breath, to like kind of dissolve these mental blocks in the body so energy can just flow naturally, you know? Um, and at the moment of transition of death, like you're just surrendering to this flow of energy. Um, but it's hard to do when we maybe have a belief that the energy isn't flowing well. Of course, the ego, again, going back to the ego, is the foundation of a belief that anything can be blocked. So I'm just going to do one more question. Clarification, I'm asking for a statement last week that everything is energy and space, emptiness. I'm trying to reconcile that with my previous belief that everything is energy and consciousness. Not all energy is conscious. That's one thing. Two, um, so energy and space. Yeah, I'm trying to reconcile with my belief that everything is energy. Um, and consciousness. Yeah, there is. I don't know. I don't know if those two statements are that different. So I think that's one I'm thinking about. Um, yeah, what I practice with is just like this kind of connecting to not all energy is necessarily conscious necessarily. Not conscious in the way that we're thinking about or experiencing consciousness like right now. You know, um, So that's where I will leave you with that. Because I actually don't have anything else to add to that question except for that. It's just consciousness is expansive, um, but not all energy is conscious. Conscious energy. Um, that's helpful. Um, so here's a quick example. Like, we can talk about like some objects. Like, what's an object around here? So here's like the ting shots here. These are the like kind of Tibetan, kind of practice little things, bells, symbols, and I don't know if these are energy, right? These are energy, like these. This is just energy and space here that we're constructing through perception as being solid and real and having certain qualities that we use to make sounds with. But I wouldn't say that this is conscious. You know, um, I think some inanimate objects can be conscious, you know, but again, I'm getting into something that I may not have time to get us out of. um, so that's what I'm saying. Not everything is conscious, you know. So, but consciousness is expansive at the same time. You know, consciousness shapes energy as well. Okay. Okay, and that's just last question. As I understand these words, both intention and grace seem to arise from different worlds and yet work together to ignite quantum expansion of my awareness. Yes. Can you talk about how you understand these words and how you have worked with them? So intention is why, you know, and grace is how. Right? So the intention, why am I doing something? Why am I thinking this? Why am I eating this? You know, the intention is the expression of consciousness, that to know why I'm doing what I'm doing, and to be able to align my attention with something that is conducive to freedom and liberation. So hate isn't conducive. So if I have an intention of hate or aversion, that's not conducive to freedom. But if I have this intention of love, which is about acceptance, allowing, expansion, then that is conducive to freedom. So that's intention. Grace is how. And grace is a kind of gentleness, it's a kind of deep understanding, it's a kind of groundedness. You know, this is how I do things. You know, sometimes you hear the phrase the grace of God. It can be interpreted as permission, you know, but anyway, in my practice, I see it as a kind of openness and kindness and gentleness that I approach to doing everything. It's the grace, you know. Um, Grace feels like grace feels like being loved. So, but more specifically, it feels like being held tenderly. It's like doing something and someone validating what you're doing as being exactly what you should be doing, what's right. You know, so it's like the grace. The grace opens up the path of what we're trying to do. Of course, combined with intention, it creates this force, right? Good intention, and I think grace is always good. Intention doesn't isn't always good, you know, or what I call conducive to freedom. So intention can be anything, you know, but grace is always positive. May the grace of God go with you, the protection, um, the openness, the guidance. That's how I understand grace. Good intention, positive liberatory intention will always draw grace. Good intention will always be graceful work or labor, you know, or doing whatever. Um, but for me, again, I just want to reiterate this grace is very gentle, it's very warm. It's when I am aligned with what is conducive, you know, for freedom. When I have the intention to get free and to get others free, then grace automatically arises because that is the natural order uh, of, I would say, the universe. The universe is flowing towards liberation. And once you get into that flow, once you stop resisting and just get into the flow of love, which love is just like this grand allowance of things, clarity, then that becomes graceful in itself. Okay. Grace and intention. Well, you know what? You know, we might as well do some practice with intention and grace, um, and space and consciousness and ego and death. I mean, why not just throw everything into the practice tonight and see where we get to? you know? So let's begin. Let's begin. So go ahead and get your prayer requests in, get your prayers before we begin. I notice as soon as we get deeper into practice, I see all these prayers coming up. So maybe because people, some of us get inspired and we start connecting to things that we want to see. But anyhow, beginning with our practice, so go ahead and invite yourself to come into a position, something that feels appropriate for practice. And go ahead and call yourself into the space. So we're probably all over the place thinking about our day, worried about something. Of course, our prayer requests, we have a lot of anxiety around. So let's actually call ourselves into the space. And you basically just say, I'm here, I'm practicing, I am beginning to engage in this practice session, however you want to phrase it. But just name what you're doing, and that's beginning to shape our intention. And of course, you can move into direct intention building by actually reflecting on why you're in this practice tonight, what you're hoping to experience, what you're hoping to send energy towards in terms of helping others. Like, what's your intention? Why are you here? Why are you practicing? Of course, this is a huge part of the system practice as well. In Buddhist tantric practice, we always start with this sense of like kind of refuge, taking refuge, but taking refuge is also intentionality. I'm doing this because I want to get free. I want to free others. Ultimately, that's the primary intention of Buddhist tantric practice, is to get ourselves free and others free from suffering. So reflect on that just for a few moments. I will assume for all of us that we're here to get free from suffering, to help others to get free from suffering. So if you're confused, take on that intention. Just reflecting on it. I wonder if you can allow that intention to really begin to kind of settle into the mind. Just like you're planting seeds. Intentions are just like planting seeds in your garden. And your practice is what waters those seeds. And continued practice is what sees these seeds turn into, plants and a harvest. You can't get to the harvest if you're not doing the tending and the practice of the fields that you've planted in. So that's what practice is, but you begin with planting the seeds, which is intention. The intention is what lays the direction in which you're going to go. So start with good intention. If you don't start with good intention, you're going to end on the other side of this work, and on the dark side of the work. This is the line between white magic and black magic. Not to use those words, but conducive magic to liberation, unconducive magic to liberation. It's the intention. The intention differentiates those two systems, those two paths. This is why we talked about earlier, a couple of weeks ago, earlier this year, about choosing light as an intention. So as you lay these intentions, I wonder if you can just connect to perhaps how energies are aligning around you. When we choose to practice to set others and ourselves free, what changes in our bodies, minds, or in the space around us? What do you feel when you choose the light? And I would just say at this point for me, I sense a really powerful alignment. It's like entering into a flow. I don't feel as if I'm fighting the flow. I feel like I'm being carried and supported in this flow and I'm going somewhere. For me, that is the experience of grace. When I choose to not fight the stream, but to allow the stream to take me into this greater experience of awakening, which is like the river flowing into the ocean. Instead of trying to swim upstream, I'm just allowing the stream to take me into the greater experience of awakening. Is what we're doing. Grace is just alignment. Just feel the alignment. And you don't have to fight. But again, you have to have a strong intention that you're choosing the path of awakening, love, kindness, freedom. And if you have that strongly chosen and planted, then the stream, you can trust the stream to take you somewhere. So I just want us to stay here for a little longer. Like, I just want you to really get clear about what it feels to plant an intention and to surrender into the flow of that energy into a greater awakening. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, because we're still fighting our attachments to what we think should be happening. Just explore it. Just explore. Just notice as much as you can about what this experience feels like. And connecting to the grace as you do that, the natural flow into something greater, more conducive to liberation. Couple more moments. And I wonder if you can trust this grace that's happening, that's arising, this flow, this being held, moving us into actually where we belong. What is that experience like for you to try to trust this? So when you're ready, I invite you just to shift your attention down to the seat. So beginning to notice the weight of the body making contact with the seat. Allowing that sensation of the body making contact with the seat to kind of anchor your attention. I'm sticking with attention. Now I want to just stay really focused and narrow, just our attention opposed to our awareness right now. Just concentrate the attention, let it be held by this anchor of the body, weight, and the seat making contact. We're also noticing how the seat is rising to meet us, to hold us. And I wonder if you can trust the seat to hold you. And this is a good space for us to explore working through trust issues as well, as many of us struggle to trust various parts of our lives, right? And our experiences. So start with something relatively small. Can you trust the seat to hold you right now? Has the seat ever not held you? And what does it feel like to really trust something? There's a few more moments sitting in this trust. Trusting the seed is actually a form of self care as well. When we trust something to take care of us, even if it's just as simple as just like a seed holding us, right? There's a lot of letting go that begins to happen. I think after we experience something traumatic or violent, or something, having really simple practice like this to restore trust is really important. To trust something. So when you're ready, we're going to shift our attention even further down into the earth. The, the seed is an expression of the earth. The floor that we're on is an expression of the earth. But when we shift our attention down, the energy of our consciousness begins to touch into the energy of the earth. So my consciousness begins to mingle with really the consciousness of the earth. Because the earth, the land, is also aware. So when we shift our attention into the earth actually shifts its attention into us. And there's this really sweet, powerful marriage that happens, a union. And again, in this union, we can take refuge and we can trust it. We trust that we're being held by the earth. You don't have to feel anything specific here when we're mingling with earth consciousness. You're not necessarily trying to have an experience. You're just saying and thinking, oh, I'm, I'm connecting to the earth. And that's all that has to happen, really. And then whatever experiences that you have is, yeah, great, wonderful, but not necessary. So a few more moments here. And you can stay in this practice for as long as you want. This is a practice, just like mingling with the earth in this way is a very profound practice. You know. I'm going to invite you to transition with me, and we're going to move into a little bit of breath practice. And again, I'll offer two sets of instructions. For those of us who are working with the breath, and the rest of us who aren't working with the breath right now. So for those of us who are working with the breath, we're going to do what I would call a central channel or breath. And the central channel runs parallel up and down the spine. And we're just going to imagine inhaling up the spine to the top of the head and back down to the bottom of the spine to the tailbone, to our seats. So just breathing up and down the channel. Sometimes you can imagine just breathing up and down the spine. Either way is fine. We always want to have a sense that we're breathing up the central column, you know, that's running up our back, up into the top of our heads and then back down to our tailbones. And if you're not working with the breath, um, you can do a couple of things. One, you can like imagine um, your attention just moving up and down the spine. Right? So that's a really nice way, just like moving up and down the spine. Or you can stay um, in the earth practice, just mingling with the earth, whatever feels appropriate for you. But in any case, we're just moving up and down the spine with our attention or with our breath. And in a way, what we're trying to do with these practices is connect to some visceral experience of the central channel, the central column in the energy body that prana and shakti runs up and down in, right? And in Tantra, in Buddhist Tantra philosophy, we're trying to really flood the central channel with as much prana energy as possible, and that begins to facilitate awakening. So this breath practice and attention practice is actually beginning to help us identify that central channel, but is also giving us something to focus the practice into, something that we can feel so we can start shifting this energy into the channel. And so you may begin to feel a little lightheaded, dizzy, and that's because, you're beginning to shift energy up and down the central column, the Uma. Yes, a few more moments here. So we're going to transition a little bit, and we're going to move into our first mantra. So it's just our welcoming mantra, our mantra of evoking Medicine Buddha Minla Sange Kino Soha. And this mantra is meant to begin to actually awaken the consciousness, the energetic consciousness of Medicine Buddha. And we're beginning to awaken this energy of Medicine Buddha's consciousness in everything, in the earth, in our bodies, in our minds, in the space around us. So it's like shifting. It's like putting on like tinted glasses, right? So you're putting on a shade of tint that where you begin to see the world in a different color. And that's what we're doing now. It's like we chant this and the energy shifts to a different quality that we begin to identify as the consciousness of Medicine Buddha, of this awakened wisdom deity associated with healing. Okay? And we begin to relate to energy, all energy, as the awakened consciousness of Medicine Buddha after we call them into this space. After we chant the spell to transform the energy, right, into this consciousness, okay? So we're chanting together. Of course, you can just sit and listen as well. So we'll begin. Again, Om Minla Sangye Kino, which means Medicine Buddha. Please think of me, but Kino can be translated into anything that we need. So right now I'm translating Kino into please awaken. So Medicine Buddha, please awaken here. Okay, so we'll begin. Om Minla Sangye Kino Soha Om Minla Sangye Kino Soha Om Minla Sangye Kino Soha. So just like that, we begin to experience the awakening of Medicine Buddha's energy, their consciousness. And then we begin to think that from this point on, all the energy that I'm working with is just an expression of this awakened, enlightened consciousness of Medicine Buddha. And even here, we can experience the grace of the deity, the openness, the space, the gentle holding and support of the deity. Just a few more moments, just sitting in this energy, just sitting here. And you're noticing the resistance, pushing away the aversion, the anxiety, the fear, the sadness, beginning to notice all of that. And that the consciousness of Medicine Buddha is holding all of it with tremendous space that we call grace. This is the grace of the deity to hold everything and for everything to essentially be an expression of the deity. Just a few more moments. So over time, as we move deeper into this practice, as you offer more to the practice over a longer period of time, what this can begin to feel like is something that's quite decadent. It's like eating, you know, like a really rich decadence, dessert or something, or whatever, but something that's really rich and warm and, just good and comfortable, and just stepping into that. Ultimately, over time, this is what the practice can lead to. This is for when you connect to the consciousness of the deity, medicine Buddha in this case, which is an expression of grace, where we've built a foundation of intention to touch that grace. Then once you get there, like you're stepping into a richness and opulence, a decadence. These are my favorite words, decadence and opulence. Mm. And then feeding on that, like letting this energy fill up or feed parts of our experience that feels depleted. You know, but again, I know that this isn't all of our experience, but just saying that this is part of the experience that can happen over sustained practice. And we just want to go right there eventually, just to land right there within the awakening of the deity's consciousness that becomes this experience of grace. So let's turning our attention back to the base of the spine in the same way that we've been doing the past couple of sessions. Going back to our earth breath. So we're going to imagine breathing as if we're breathing from the base of the spine, both inhaling and exhaling right now to begin with, from the base of the spine. So imagining bringing our breath low, deep down into the bottom, to the seat. As we begin to inhale, imagining that we're inhaling energy from the earth, this energy, of groundedness, stability, whatever, however you're identifying earth energy. Again, if you're not using the breath, just imagine that like your body begins to absorb the energy of the earth into the base of the spine, or what we would also call the root chakra system. And we're just breathing in or absorbing into the base of the spine right now before we begin the exhale. We can begin to feel the body, our minds actually begin to stabilize, to ease up a little bit, to settle more. So a few more breaths and a few more moments. So just like last week, as we continue with this part of the practice, We're going to imagine continuing breathing into the base of the spine or just absorbing energy into the base of the spine, the root chakra. And then on the exhale, we imagine exhaling up the body to the heart chakra, to this energy center associated with love, empathy, compassion. And so when we breathe up, or actually when we exhale up into the heart chakra, we really deposit this warm energy of the earth, which is also an expression of medicine Buddha now, into the heart center, and that begins to feed the heart center. So it begins to feed our compassion, our love, our equanimity, our kindness. It begins to feed sorrow and sadness and fatigue, particularly emotional fatigue, right? And you're just allowing that to really sink deep into the heart chakra. And as always, you can imagine, that this energy is light, or it can just be energy, it can be warmth. And again, if you're not using the breath, you're just imagining sending this energy right into the heart center. You don't have to rely on the breath. And slowly, the heart center just begins to expand and open. You begin to let go. It's as if you're melting into the experience of the heart center opening. And we're going to do that with our second mantra. Teata bacon se, maha bacon se, rasa sumangate soha. And so this is the visualization that we'll use for the first part of our mantra. And then I'll take a break, come back and offer prayers, the prayers that we've offered. And then we'll just add, another stage to the practice, and that's where we'll end for the practice tonight. So staying where you are, and again, as always, you can go back to any part of this practice, any stage that we started with, and just be there. And that will be enough as well. Okay? So we'll begin. O teata begenze ma begenze rasa sumungate soha. 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 Teata begenze Transition into offering our prayers for our practice tonight. As we begin, I call on all the Buddhas, Bodhisattvas, the Dharma protectors, all protectors of the lands that we're living and practicing on. I call in the consciousness of the earth and all the elements. I call in the consciousness and the presence of our protecting ancestors and other spirits, angels, all beings on the side of light, to hear our prayers and to act in accord with our deepest wishes, to experience freedom from suffering, and for all those around us and whom we're offering prayers for to experience freedom. And we're offering prayers, offering prayers for myself. I need help and I'm practicing asking for it. Offering prayers for all beings. Prayers for liberation for all beings from addiction states. Offering prayers for Joe, who is sick and grieving. Offering prayers for the Ukrainians and the Africans being rejected to cross over or being held to the back of the line to leave. Offering prayers for all those experiencing fear today. Offering prayers for the earth and all the trees and all the beings and humans for healing and for growth. Prayers for all the people who are suffering from war and violence and displacement. And offering prayers for Ukraine and my ancestors' homeland. Offering prayers for the Ukrainians. Prayers for me. And prayers for all beings trying to get free. We're offering prayers for Artie and who lost her son today. Prayers for John moving through grief. Prayers for Rourke facing illness and mortality. Prayers for Andrea and her mother in hospice, prayers for my fractured shoulder, prayers for the earth and all its life forms with the climate emergency, prayers for Imelda on her first day of treatment, offering prayers for all my loved ones going through periods of transition and transformation, including myself, offering prayers for those who are trying, suffering, and growing. And offering prayers for all communities, people, countries who are in experience of violence from war that we will never pay attention to, for all beings who survive wars that go unseen, unheard, and unvalidated by the world. We offer prayers for our ancestors who survived war and genocide, and we continue to pray to release all beings from the trauma of violence. Um, we're offering prayers for the alleviation and disruption of all systems of violence that restrict people from being happy and healthy, and getting access to resources that they need in order to be well. Offer prayers for all of us in this space. All of those who struggle to pray for ourselves, to work to gather the resources that we need, those of us who are always working to help others, to support others. I offer prayers for you that you get what you need and that you're able to experience the deepest well being, happiness, and joy that allows you to continue to be of benefit to all beings. I pray that we all achieve enlightenment as quickly as possible. And turning our attention back into our practice, we're going to shift the practice a little bit. So as we're breathing into the heart center, we exhale into the heart center. And then for the next stage of the practice, inhaling into the heart center. And then exhaling that energy of healing and expansion throughout the whole body. So it's as if like the heart center just releases this energy and it spreads out to the body. Okay. So again, breathing into the root chakra, exhaling up to the heart chakra, and then inhaling into the heart chakra. Then imagining exhaling internally into the rest of the body. And then at this point, you can imagine that this energy, right, that is expanding from the heart center is being shared with those we've offered prayers for. Right? So this energy, this awakened medicine Buddha energy, consciousness, the energy of the earth, however you're identifying with this in this moment, that you're beginning to share this. Like in your mind, you're just sharing this with all those beings we've offered prayers for those crossing to the Bordo, into the Bardo, spirit world, for those experiencing war, right, violence right now, all those connected to us who are just struggling to be well right now. We're just offering this energy to them, imagining wellness and stability arising for them through the sharing of energy. And again, if you're not using the breath, just imagining just flowing energy to the heart center, And then from the heart center, imagine the energy just blossoming out, spreading out through the body, and being shared with others. Okay? So we begin again. 로제아 자옴베겐세 베겐세 마베겐세 라스 수문같이 수아 에아 자옴베겐세 베겐세 마베겐세 라스 수문같이 수아 제아 자옴베겐세 베겐세 마베겐세 라서 숨은 같이 쏘아 제야 자웅대 현세 배현세 마배현세 라서 숨은 같이 쏘아 제야 자웅대 현세 배현세 마배현세 라서 숨은 같이 쏘아 제야 자웅대 현세 배현세 마배현세 라서 숨은 같이 쏘아 제야 자움배현세 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 배현세 마배현세 마음 같이 쏘아 제야 자움배현세 배현세 마배현세 라서 숨은 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 같이 쏘아 제야 Soa. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raza sumungate sua. Te ata begenze, begenze, ma begenze, raza sumungate soa. And just taking a few moments to just send the last bits of this healing, liberatory energy out into the world. Right? When you're ready, shifting your attention back to the weight of your body, making contact with the seat, and noticing the sensation of the body being held by the seat. Letting that sensation bring you back into the moment, into this particular timeline. Okay? So letting go of the visualizations and the breath, coming back to a normal breath. And making one last wish as we transition out of practice. And of course, that wish is for all beings to be free from suffering, including yourself. So may all beings be free from suffering, including myself. Including myself. And if you can, just somehow just touching the body somewhere. I like to just touch my heart center when I'm acknowledging that I too deserve to be free from suffering. This one here, deserves to be free. And then when you're ready, just kind of reawakening the body, doing some gentle movements, some shaking, some shimmying. Just begin to loosen up and disperse some of this energy that's been building up. And if you're working with the breath, just doing a few deep inhales, cleansing breaths, just breathing through the nose, out through the mouth, just releasing. Doing that a couple of times. So we'll move on to our closing prayer, Shanti Deva's prayer from the Bodhisattva's Way of Life. Okay, and we'll recite this 3 times. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, I also be the source of life for all the boundless beings, for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. May I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. And finally, may I be a protector to those without protection, a leader for those who journey, and a boat, a bridge, a passage for those desiring the further shore. May the pain of every living creature be completely cleared away. May I be the doctor and the medicine, and may I be the nurse for all sick beings in the world until everyone is healed. Just like space and the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures, and until they pass away from pain, may I also be the source of life for all the realms of varied beings that reach into the ends of space. Okay. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your practice. And again, just always reminding you to um, check our Booming Special website for practice groups, for everything we have. We have Wednesday night talks, and Lama Justin's doing Mahamudra on Fridays, and everything else is happening on my schedule as well. Let me just quickly go through these last questions, so I just have them so we can so make sure I just clean up all the questions for this week. Question for another night. What happens to the world, to all beings, when we all achieve enlightenment? Well, when every being achieves enlightenment, samsara ends. But samsara exists as long as one being uh, remains in delusion. Um, so that's what we're going for. I have another statement to make about this question, but that's going to lead us down a whole nother path that 10 minutes won't be able to get us out of. And last question, can I share how this medicine Buddha practice compares to Tonglen? It seems similar, but leave me with a different feeling. The deity and chanting, very grounded. Yeah, because you're working with separate energy. You're working with a different kind of conscious energy. Tonglen is working with your consciousness, and your energy. But, we're awakening energies. We're pulling energy. And so Tonglen, we're focusing on um, well, I guess I don't know how I would say it. Misunderstood energy, conflicted energy, blocked energy. Um, the energy of suffering, like just energy, I mean, energy, suffering, the energy of suffering, or just suffering in general, is again about perspective, is how we are misunderstanding the energy to begin with. So Tonglen focuses on that misunderstanding of that energy, which we call suffering. Medicine Buddha, deity practices in general, we're awakening liberatory, well, conscious energies that are liberatory, and that leaves us with a different feeling. But sometimes that feeling isn't great. You still feel maybe lightheaded, or it can disrupt other things as well because you're awakening and cleaning things. Like as my teacher used to say, it's like these practices are like building a fire, and at the beginning of building a fire, you get a lot of smoke until the flame gets nice and strong. And so at the beginning, for a lot of us, we just experience a lot of smoke, so it's like really not the best feeling, but over time, our energy pathways, our channels, our chakras begin to open. We're trying to open chakras and raise the frequency of the chakras. With our channels, we're trying to essentially unclog the channels so energy flows freely through them. So all this is happening in the practice, and so that can not feel so great, but can lead to a kind of spaciousness and awakening from that. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for your support. And would there be existence without samsara? Well, there are God's realms that exist outside of samsara. Awakened God's realm. So yeah, samsara is just one kind of existence that is skewed towards suffering. But there are other kinds of existence, right, that are outside of suffering. Until one enters into complete nirvana, which is a dissolving back into greater consciousness, you're going to exist, but you don't have to exist in suffering. Once one achieves enlightenment, you have transcended the cycle of suffering. So when you come back into the world, or when you emanate, into the world, you may be living through samsara, but you no longer are bound by samsara. And some beings achieve full awakening if they're an awakened being intentionally. What did I just say? Emanating, right? Some beings will achieve enlightenment, but if they don't fully achieve awakening in the dream, when they die, they go right back to the awakened state. So, anywho, I think that is it for me. Yeah. I just want to say this too. So I guess I have a need to go to 9 o'clock tonight. Like the physical wars that we're experiencing in the world that people have experienced, right? That's only one kind of war that's happening, and sometimes it's not even the most impactful war that's happening. There's a kind of spiritual warfare that's happening in unseen spaces, unseen worlds all around us. That's also happening as well. So part of what I'm trying to get us into, and I hope this will happen in the next years of my work, is for us to have much more of an expansive view of what's happening in all the worlds. You don't have to see anything, right, or experience anything. Just knowing that there's more happening. Like war is happening on all the planes of existence, unfortunately, particularly all the planes of existence within samsara. Outside samsara, not so much, right? Not really. But within samsara, all the planes of existence and being, there are conflicts. There will always be conflicts if you have innate belief in the sense of self, this illusion of self is always good. Self is always going to be the root of violence and conflict, right? Until we change that relationship, begin to experience the illusion of ego, that illusion of ego introduces us to space, and we begin to move from reactivity to responsiveness. And in responsiveness, we can choose liberation instead of contracting, and creating violence and harm for others. So this is what we're trying to do. Um, and it's a long road, but it is a worthwhile pursuit for all of us. Okay. All right. Well, anyway, I will see everyone next week, I guess. Okay. All right. Be well, everyone. I'll talk to you soon. Please take care of yourself as well. Okay. All right. Bye.